Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August 25th edition of the Intuit Developer Friday Morning Hangout. I'm your host, David Leary. I'm the Intuit Small Business Ecosystem Evangelist. You can follow me on Twitter at David Leary. Today we have a special guest, Hao Lu is going to join us. He's a software engineer from our Intuit developer team. He actually has rewritten the PHP SDK and wants to present everything he knows about it to you guys today, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. So as a reminder, please use the webinar chat for any chats you might have, audio, visual difficulties, etc., and reserve the Q&A panel for questions for today's guests. So today we are going to be talking soon about the PHP SDK. Before we do that, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. Couple of announcements. Don't forget, please go and vote for the top apps of the year for this $100,000 Intuit Developer Small Business App Showdown. There's 21 days left of voting. We're now in the voting phase, and then after the voting phase, we'll be announcing the final 10. The final 10 we're going to bring to QuickBooks Connect, where they'll pitch, and the winner will take home $100,000. Those of you who may not have hit the deadline to be in the contest this year, August 15th, hopefully, you never know, we might run it again, and then you can sign up again when we run it for the following year. So. And give me a moment to next slide here. And I also want to remind everybody about QuickBooks Connect. That's coming up in San Jose. It's November 15th through the 17th. We've actually just announced some of the speakers. So if you go to that page, you can see some of the main stage speakers that are coming to that event. And we've started to announce what the agenda and the schedule is looking like. So we're going to do the hackathon on November 11th and 12th, if you guys want to come in on the Saturday and Sunday before. And then we have the Accountants Day and the main day and then the finale day. On the Accountants Day, we're really looking to do some additional developer-related things on that day so that are specific to developers. So just stay tuned, watch for announcements, and watch the Intuit blog post, the Intuit Developer blog post for more. And as a reminder, you can find this Hangout and actually any events that we might be attending or going to on the developer site. So it's developer.intuit.com/hub/events. And you can find all the Hangouts there and join them, as well as any webinars or meetups, hackathons, conferences, any places we're attending, they'll all be listed here. So you can come by and say hi to us. And without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing here and get everybody introduced to Hao. Give me a moment to change over here. Hao, good morning.
Hey, good morning, David.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Good. I know before everybody got here, we just briefly talked. I was in the impression that you created the PHP SDK, but you corrected me. You just rewrote it, and now it's kind of your baby. Did you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So we have a lot of comments and feedbacks for the PHP SDK. People want to improve it. So I did a lot of job to rewrite the PHP SDK to reach a status where people can use it easily and achieve their target in an easy way. So there are a lot of features introduced to PHP SDK, and it's much better, actually, in my opinion, compared to the previous version. So right now, the version is 3.4, and we have only 2.0 before I rewrite it. So it's a big improvement right now.
Got it. And so today you're going to go through the kind of a slide deck showing the different improvements that are in there. Right. You're going to do a couple different scenarios like the OAuth and a couple other scenarios using the SDK. Then you're going to kind of do an overall view of like how to pull it all together, how to download it, the full end-to-end, setting it up in your IDE, etc.
Actually, I want to, while I was demoing the points, I want to actually go to the websites and show them how to do it. So it's going to be run with the slide. That's my plan today.
Oh, perfect. I'll give you a chance to share your desktop. And while you're doing that, I know some of you have just popped in a little bit late. As a reminder, please use the webinar chat for any chat type discussions, audio visual issues, etc. Use the reserve and use the Q&A panel to ask any questions to Hao or anything about the PHP SDK today. So without further ado, it looks like you're sharing successfully, Hao. I'm going to mute myself, so I'm not interrupting you, and I'll let you jump in.
Okay, thank you, David. So, yeah, hi everybody. My name is Hao. I am a software engineer at IDG Group. So my main job now is for designing and rewriting everything for PHP SDK. We have a lot of feedbacks from our developers in the past few months, and we have committed a lot of efforts trying to improve our users' experience on PHP SDK. So today, I'm going to show you some of the new improvements we have made and how to use the PHP SDK in an efficient way. So, the topic we're going to be starting from introduction. Then I'm going to talk about the OAuth support, the SDK features, and one big part we have done is for the facade support for PHP SDK. And what is our future plan? The rest of the time, we're going to be left for you to ask questions. So starting introduction of the PHP SDK. So we can download the PHP SDK in two ways. First, using Composer, or we can use the download link on the GitHub as a zip file. So using Composer is going to be straightforward. Let me show you. So you're going to open the a browser. You can type it on Google actually. So if you search for PHP SDK QuickBooks and scroll down, you'll see the first GitHub link as the official PHP SDK. Click on it. This is the official PHP SDK we have right now for QuickBooks Online. So the README file will be the main source for all of our developers to understand how to use the PHP SDK. So we have two ways. The official way is to use the Composer as installation. For example, if I go to the terminal, I went to one of my Apache root window. If I just enter the Composer install command, Composer require, I think is Composer require QuickBooks. Give the document. Now, the SDK will be installed in the specified location by Composer. So when everything is installed, you're going to see there are going to be three files. One is called vendor. So everything you installed will going to be come to this directory. The composer.json and composer.log file is all the information, the dependencies, the installation path you have for your composer libraries dependencies. That is one way, which is the official way. So for some people who do not have Composer or not familiar with Composer, we actually have a different way. If you go to the release tag here, you will see there's a different version, release version we have made in the past. So on the latest version, which is 3.4, there is a download link. You can just download the source file and unzip it. And starting using in that way, it's going to have everything here and actually can use it. The difference is there is one requirement for Composer. So on the documentation I've mentioned, to use the SDK, we require PHP version 5.6 or greater. So it is in my case, I have 5.6 from my Apple Store. But for some people who actually do not have 5.6, you can use the download link here to trick the Composer. So since all the PHP versions are backward compatible, so you can just use the download and use it. That's how to use the SDK to download it. So back to the slides. For documentations, we have two parts. The first part is going to be the README file, which I just showed you. And another part is on our dev portal. So if you click on it, actually, I'm going to just copy and paste. you will see there's a PHP page on our dev portal telling you all the features you have. So you can see how to install the SDK, how to migrate from version 2 to version 3, and etc. It's pretty useful. You can use both the README file on the GitHub link and the documentation on our dev portal to get the basic ideas how to use it. So besides that, for any issues or release notes, you're going to use the issues page to find out the open issues we have. Some of these issues are opened by myself. For example, here's one bug I found on the PHP SDK, which have an issue on serialization and deserialization. Some of them are reported by the developers from other peoples. So all of them are going to be recorded here. You can see the past closed ones to have a better idea what the issues have resolved and how can we use it. Once you know how to download it, we can go ahead and introduce our OAuth parts for the PHP SDK. So right now, QuickBooks support two kinds of OAuth, OAuth 1 and OAuth 2. For OAuth 1 on PHP SDK, we can use it by passing the array or config file. I'm going to show you later. Or when you use OAuth 2, then we have actually better support. So pretty much all the functions you're going to use with OAuth 2 will be available on the PHP SDK. From the starting, how to get the authorization code, how to get the OAuth token, refresh token, how to make the API call with the OAuth 2 tokens, and how to do the refresh tokens. And for security, how do we handle the certificates? Everything for OAuth 2 will be handled on the PHP SDK. So for example, if you go to the SDK page, you'll find out there's a OAuth 1, OAuth 2 section here. So here is how you're going to use the OAuth 1 on your code. So you're going to specify the OAuth mode as OAuth 1, enter your consumer key and consumer secrets. For OAuth 2, you're going to be your OAuth 2 OAuth mode and the client ID and the client secrets. For people who do not know where to find those values, go to the developer.intuit.com, sign in.
And we did, 2 weeks ago,
Sure.
4 weeks ago, we did a Friday morning hangout with the OAuth 2.0 team. So
Right.
if you guys on YouTube, you look at the other OAuth videos or the other Intuit hangout videos, you'll see an OAuth video. And then actually 2 weeks from now, that team's coming back to do just a deeper Q&A session just on OAuth 2. So just for some of those who may have some questions on OAuth 2, there's definitely other resources out there.
Thanks, David. So back to the app. So this is one app I created for OAuth 2. If I click on it, on the keys tab, you can find the client ID and the client secret value, which are going to be entered on the client ID and the client secret key. So you're going to replace these two values from here to the data service, client ID, client secret. For the other values, access token, refresh token, realm ID, and the base URL, that's a little different. So you're going to use the OAuth playground to get these values. So if you go to your dashboard, and you can click on the test connect on OAuth, you're going to give you to the OAuth 2 playground. And you can go ahead and enter your scope, do everything from there, and select the sandbox, click on authorize, and get tokens. So now you will see a list of the information we need for the rest of the configurations. The company ID will be put here as the realm ID, and the access token, which is pretty long for us too, we're going to put on the access token key part. And for the refresh token, which you can get from here, you can put this value to the refresh token part. Once you have everything set up from the PHP file, can start to call the API without problem. I'm going to show you later. So many people have a question regarding to the client ID and the client secrets. So these two values are unique to OAuth 2. So as you see in my app, I have the client ID and the client secret here. But if I log into a different account, and on my apps, you'll see it has values called OAuth consumer key and consumer secrets. That is how to distinguish whether you are using OAuth 1 on your app or OAuth 2. If you see consumer key, consumer secret, then you are using OAuth 1. You're going to put your values on the OAuth 1 mode here. For the rest, you're going to use the OAuth 2 client ID and the client secret. Once you have everything configured, then you can do anything you want. So for example, we have the refresh token calls, and we have the certificate settings for OAuth 2 as well. I'm going to show you later. So one thing to point out is the OAuth 1 has a playground and OAuth 2 has a playground as well. Those playgrounds are different. So when you're trying to generate your access tokens from this playground, from OAuth 2 or OAuth 1, you can always go here and click on the test connect to app. Based on your app, you're going to go to either OAuth 1 playground or OAuth 2 playground. And when you click on the C2QB button, everything will be the same. The UI will be the same, but the logic, the protocol behind it will be different. So you're going to use all these different values to add to your data service config file, actually config code. So once you have the OAuth 1, OAuth 2 completed, we can move to the other things we allowed our developers to do for the PHP SDK. So logging is one big thing. So when you actually do the PHP SDK, you can always enable the logging and the minor versions. So the way to do it is to, after you get the config values for all tokens, you're going to set your minor versions to the one you need, and the log location, you're going to record your logs. The default minor version for PHP is 8. So for all other versions, for example, 4, 9, 11, or 12, you have to use these functions to change the minor versions. Same rule applied to the log locations. So I have a folder created on my desktop called a new folder for log. So everything, all the requests and the response I communicate with QBO we're going to be put on the log. And for the error handling, we have the error handling listed on the README file. So once you actually make the API call, for example, this is a create request, so he used the add, you're going to get the error from data service, and you can see the status code, the helper message, response message, and some internal information from Intuit. If there's no error, you can go ahead to do the next step, for example, create a new invoice based on the customer or anything else. So always remember to use the data service -get last error to find out whether you have any API errors, which means non-200 response from the QBO to make sure everything was created correctly or queried correctly. And a big improvement we have made to the PHP SDK is the dependency removal. So before, on PHP version 2.x, it can be 2.4, 2.5, 2.6. We always require people to have what we call the, let me see if I still have it. Yeah, I still have it. What we call for the OAuth 1.3 library. So this is the requirements for previous version, starting from 2.x. Right now, all the PHP SDK was standing alone, which means besides the PHP you have to install, all the rest are handled by the SDK itself. There's no dependencies and there's no requirements from other libraries. Just download the SDK and use it. That is all. For people who want to see the call functions, how to use the curl to make the API call, you can go to the source folders. On the call part, there's HTTP clients. There is a base curl and curl HTTP client. These two classes are the basic classes to handle all the HTTP calls, including setting up the headers, setting up the options, and handling the errors. For specific OAuth 1 or OAuth 2 calls, go to the sync REST handlers. And there's going to be one called OAuth 1 API call, which have all details how to make the call, how to set up the headers, the return types, the request URL. Similar to OAuth 2, you have everything here. So for people who are confused how we make the API call, you can always go to the code to see how we do it. That's really a good way for people to understand the OAuth 1 versus OAuth 2 when they're trying to do something. And the serializer and the deserializer is also built in. So we have all the serialization part on the HTTP serialization. So you can see there's JSON, there's XML. So based on the entity type, you can either decompress or deserialize or serialize the request using one of these two serializers. I'm going to show the results based on the request you have. Next part is going to be the big part for our PHP SDK improvements, which is called Facade Support. So usually one big issue for most of our RESTful API designers is how do we tell the developers what our API looks like, how to use it. Usually many of the people will need to read a starting guide, a developer guide, or any other materials to understand how the API works. So whether it's going to be a hybrid, whether it's going to be a REST hybrid, or it's pure REST. So it's really, really hard for the beginners, especially for QuickBooks Online. So we have so many different entities. If you go to our documentation here, on the accounting APIs, we have invoice, we have bill, we have deposit. All these entities are so many. And if you're going to use an object-oriented way, let me show you what I mean. To configure all the objects, then you're going to end up with such a long code and remembering everything and typing everything. So for invoice, you have to set up the deposit, the domain, doc number, and the transaction date and customer reference. See the difference between the type of the value. Some of them is a string, some is a primitive type, a Boolean, or can be integer, a numeric type. So people has to be really careful not messing up all these values. Otherwise, QBO may return something, okay, the request you have made is not valid. So with the facade wrapper, our documentation will be the sample code. So you do not need to remember anything like whether for example, the invoice class have a custom reference, whether the transaction status is a string or a different values. All you need to do is just go to the docs and go to the entity you want to find out, for example, for the invoice, and see the correct ones, copy the code from the documentations, and enter on your script. All you need to do is to change the sign, for example, from semicolon to arrow sign, which is array representation in PHP, and rest of them are going to be the same. So you can actually not just passing a primitive type like a string, integer, or Boolean value. you can actually pass object type. For example,
so this is a way to easily get those payloads added to your code.
right, exactly. So all these values can be exactly what you want. So if you want to have a variable you set up by yourself, just pass it on the array. And if you have some objects you created before, for example, we have a line object, then on here, you can just say the line we're going to be a line object we created before. So there's no need to do all these settings from start to the end. See how many code you have here? You have to check everything. If there's one field you type wrong, for example, domain, you have Y at the end, they're going to give you a problem. But for here, it's always going to check the schema. So if anything wrong, will not actually give you a success request. It's going to actually give you the errors and trying to tell you something is not working. You have to correct your code to make it work. And for right now, all the API endpoint entities, we're going to support it by the facade layer. So everything from the SDK will show you a list of the facade endpoints. This is going to be the same as the reference documentations. So we have the bill, we have the deposit, we have the payment, we have the sales receipt. So anything you want to create from here can be found on the list on the facade. And another good thing is for those people who do not know how to use it, you can just go to the source. And there's a sample folder. Everything can be found there. So for using the invoice to create an invoice, you can go to invoice and enter your values on the data service and just enter the invoice you want to create and click on it. So I can just show you how it looks like. So I just installed the composer from the PHP GitHub link. So if I go to my vendor page, I'm going to find out the QuickBooks. I'm going to go to QuickBooks and go to the SDK. There's going to be a source folder, and we're going to go to the samples. So there's a list of samples. I can simply type PHP, for example, invoice create, and they're going to return the information I have. So if I look at it, the error is not null, so they return the error code from the terminal. So we know, okay, we have 401, which means the token is expired. So what I need to do here is replace the tokens with the value I have. So let's do it now. So actually, let's go to the playground. I'm going to use my other account. I'm going to go to the keys. I'm going to copy the client ID. Actually, it's on the, well, since this one is the invoice 1, just change to invoice 2. And copy the code from our OAuth 2 parts. And we're going to enter my.
While you're pasting that in, Hal, I just want to remind everybody, it's kind of at the bottom of the hour here, about a half hour to go. Again, if you need to ask any questions, please use the Q&A panel and then the chat for any chat discussions around anything else that you want to talk about in the chat.
So we have pasted keys. Now we can go to the OAuth playground to get the authorization code. Going to be the same process we did it before. We're going to authorize it. going to get a code, get the company ID, copy the company ID from the link to here. And using the access token, which is going to be a long value. And save. So for refresh token, we can get from the playground as well. Since we are calling our sandbox, so we can just use development as the base URL. So now let's try again, see if it will work. So tell me missing inventory qualities. So the inventory quality, change to 1. See if it still works. Yeah, now it works. So you can see how we make the, using the SDK to make the API call to the QuickBooks Online. And the good thing is, since I set up the log locations, which is on my desktop and new folder for log, if I open a new tab, I go to my desktop and the new folder for log, I can see all the requests I just made. So for example, the latest one is going to be 8. So I'm going to open the 8th one, which is going to be create the invoice. I can see the endpoint URL I'm calling, the realm ID, the headers, and the bodies. And when I want to see the response, I can see that as well. So going to get all the response from QBO, even it's not formatted, and tell me what do you have. If you have an error, let's say we just get from the previous request, we have 400 errors, which is the same request, but we get a 400. Now, if we see the response, we're going to see the response here has the missing inventory item, and the detail is going to be a quantity required for inventory item is not there. So you will know what is the problem on your code, such coming back and fixing it. This is a really big improvement we have made for our PHP developers. So they can easily using the SDK to do all the API call without knowing exactly which class have which field or which method. We can simply go to the documentations here and trying to copy the create method, changing the, where's the create? Changing the semicolon to the arrow sign and it will work. So back to the points. The future we have 2 plans right now for the future plan. So many people are aware of the QuickBooks Online thing that you always give you sometimes a 400 or 501. The server is down or there's something problem. There's a throttling issues. So we're trying to provide retry mechanisms for our PHP developers. So once they want to do a retry setup, they can automatically turn it on. So the SDK, we're going to send the same request to QBO after incremental time. For example, the first one is going to be 1 second, second one is going to be 2 seconds, essential. And another thing is for the client-side catch. So for all the QuickBooks Online API calls, it can be a failure, it can be a success. So when we want to get some calls, instead of from the database in your system, you can just using the client-side catch, which is going to be a session, recording all the data for you to use in a later time. It's on the plan right now, and it's going to be released in the middle of next year sometimes. So any questions?
Yeah, a couple questions are starting to stream in here. Somebody was wondering about, is there a way to combine the request logs?
What does that mean to combine the request log?
Yeah, I'm not positive. That's just the way it was asked. And then maybe if Eric can clarify on that, that would be helpful. And Tom asked about can he log? Can he only log errors? Is that possible?
Sorry, say it again, please.
Tom was asking if he can only log errors.
Well, that is not possible right now. So I can put on my to-do list to see if it's going to be something we can implement. It's doable, actually. I don't think it's going to be too much time for me to change the code to log the errors only. But right now, all the requests and response are going to be logged. There's going to be no distinguish between a success call or failure call. Simply record everything. That's current behavior.
Got it. Okay, because he was, yeah, he said, yes, please. So he's looking, he would love to find that out.
Good.
Got it. And Eric, yeah, if you could just clarify a little bit on what you meant about combining the request log, that'd be helpful. And then another question from Yarwar, have you updated the API also, or just updated the SDK?
API is not something. So we currently are designing our V4 API, which will have a great improvement compared to V3. So many of the things you see, there's either give you an error or some bug on the V3 API. That will not be happened. Well, hopefully that will be happen on V4, since we divide our backend architecture to a microservices, and we are trying to reframe each service to be a good component by itself. So we are trying to give the best performance on our side. So right now for the V3, we are still actively changing the code to make it better and debugging some errors and fixing some bugs. But there's no big improvements, like there's no fundamental change or architecturally change on the V3 API. Only on V4 is going to be possible. That's what we are doing right now for the QuickBooks Online.
And I pasted in the chat the link to the release notes for the QuickBooks Online developer release notes. So this will be they tend to cover everything from API changes, apps.com changes, anything that we're changing at all that's going to affect you as a developer. We try to capture there and make them available. So you want to definitely hit those. And then it looks like Eric did clarify, so I'll read what he said. He said, I have hundreds of requests, and it's very difficult to find an error when it occurs unless there is a better way to find an error. No big deal if not. My workaround is just to grep for the error to find the request log that has an error. It would be easier to just tail a single error log to see it as it occurs in the execution. Okay, this sounds very similar to what Tom's question was, like an isolation of just the error messages.
Right. I will actually add a to-do list task on my job list. So right now, if you can go to the issues, so on the issues page, so there are a few things I need to either improve or change now. But I will actually put it on here as a to-do list for me to separate the success log with the error logs.
Can you add that right now so everybody can see how easy it is to log an issue?
Oh, sure. So I can just click on new issues. And the title going to say separate normal success log with error logs. So on PHP SDK, oops.
And just to make sure to clarify also, this is just issues specifically in GitHub for the PHP SDK. Like don't put in like, hey, I wish QuickBooks Online API did X, right? It's really stuff specific to the functionality of the PHP SDK.
So I'm going to assign to myself and submit these new issues. So here is the list of the issues we have open right now. So one thing I'm going to do is for revoking part, the revoking was not implemented correctly, so I need to change it as well. And there's a download capabilities for the data service part. So anything as long as is related to the PHP SDK, you can always free to create issue here. Or some people actually prefer to just send me emails. You can find the information here. Actually, my email address is hao_lu@intuit.com. And if you're trying to go to the support forum for our dev portal, you can also go here. And you can find a list of the questions people have asked for PHP SDK. So one example is how to exchange authorization code for PHP SDK, which is the JIRA issues are created here. So grabbing access token from authorization code. So all these questions are going to be answered in a period of time. So sometimes I'm going to go to the GitHub link to answer the questions. Sometimes I'm going to go to the forums to find the questions I'm going to see and answer them, or just create the JIRA tickets here.
Got it.
So that is how I'm going to solve all the track and solve all the issues with PHP SDK.
Got it. So we kind of have one very, very specific question about
Sure.
some XML crashes. Then we have another question from Ryan about best practices. So maybe we'll just let you, since you're kind of in issue mode, we'll jump on this first one. Like, have you improved anything in the SDK to handle special characters to avoid the XML crashing? I guess a lot of times the error won't be displayed if the XML crashes. Like, how do we handle that situation?
That is actually, I did some level, but not to the full levels. So what I mean is, before there's some errors for the different data format. So for example, for the object type has a boolean, has a data format, has something. That is not handled correctly by the HTML. So it's now handled correctly. But for the special characters, there can be two reasons. First, the SDK was recorded correctly, but for the QBO on the API level, it is rejected. For that part, there's nothing I can do. But what I can do is I can do a check logic on the PHP SDK. So when I detect there's a string and the string has a special character included, I'm going to check if it meets the criteria by the API. If it's not, I'm going to send a warning. So pretty much like doing a client-side check for that special characters. Right now, there's still no implementations for special checking for special characters, but I will do something for it in the later time.
Okay, he definitely came back and said, yes, please. So I think it's another another thing to add to your to-do list. We won't watch you type it in this time, maybe just a post note on the side.
Sure.
This is great. And then Ryan actually had a question. He was wondering about best practices or methods for checking for and adding new vendors and customers. He said they often run into problems with duplicates in their integration.
So duplicates can be different reasons. So that's something QBO decided from the QuickBooks desktop. So it's a feature inheritance. So for example, for the invoice, you guys go up, the invoice number can be duplicated. So something you have to actually configure on your, let me see if I can find it. Duplicate. Hope this one can, no, actually, let's see. It's going to be a reference. Yeah, so here's this says. So QBO actually was inherited some of the features from QuickBooks Desktop. One of the features is we do allow duplicate doc number. So one preference we can set is the custom transaction number. And if it's set to false and the value is supplied, then the value will be stored even it is a duplicate values. So always check the settings of preference before setting doc numbers. That's one principle. Some developers forget to do it, they get the duplicate numbers. And another thing is a bug on the QBO actually. There's one bug on QBO actually, not handling the API call versus the sandbox call. So if you do the UI call first, then on the API, there's synchronization issues which causing the errors, making the doc number to be duplicate. And I think they are still trying to fix it. It seems like it's not going to be easy fix. So the QBO team is still working on their best to try to resolve this bug. But there's some people reported that before. So we know it's a bug and we are trying to fix it right now.
Got it. Someone was asking offhand about partial updates on, for example, editing a vendor. Can you do a partial update on a vendor?
Yes.
Details?
So if we can see the vendor page, I don't have the example here, but let me go to the source. Hopefully I can find the similar ones. And there should be an update. So I'm using the customized example because the format is pretty similar. So once I have the, let's say I made a query. I try to find the customer with a specific ID. In your case, you may want to find a specific customer with a name or with account number. But once you do the query, you're going to return one of the customers. You're going to find the first one. So depends on the result. It may be an empty list or list of customer object that applied to all other entities. So if you change customer from vendors, you're going to return a vendor of the entities as well. Then you can use the update method from the facade layers. So you're going to change the customer's object and update it with the field you have. Let's say I want to change the customer with a different display name, and I want to change the display name only. I don't want to change everything. So I mark the sparse as false and change this name as something different. Then click it as the update method. Now a successful request is going to return to you with the display name change to whatever you have here. So similar thing to the vendor, you're going to go to the API documentations. Go to the vendor. I think it's on the name list report. Yeah. You go into the documentations and see update a vendor and see which information you want to add and copy the name as the array's key. And the value depends on your requirements, append it to the update method and change it. If you have any issues or problems, you can just send me emails with my email address listed on the README files, Hao_Lu@Intuit.com. I can debug the code for you to see what is the problem.
That's really helpful. Any other questions that are coming in? So how much like is 90% of your time spent on the PHP SDK? Are you answering support tickets outside of the PHP SDK? What else are you involved in on the developer team?
Yeah, pretty much my time with PHP SDK is about 40% right now.
Okay.
So it's not everything. That is the unfortunate thing. So I still have my support tickets, my side project, and sometimes help designing with the V4 API as well. So usually if you see the release node, you go to release here and check the time. It's approximately about every 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to see a release. For some big release, like a number from 3 to 4, it's going to be into longer. And for some shorter release, it's around 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to fix the bugs, to actually have some check-ins. The reason why is QBO actually was kind of old systems, and then many of the check-in part was not valid. So I am enforced to do some check-ins on the client side. So that can take relatively longer times for all the check-ins. So I saw that people was asking, how about the address? How about the special characters? How about the XML parsing issues? So those things I'm still trying to find a good way, because it makes more sense to actually check on the QBO side. If we are going to do on the client side, that means every SDK, like PHP, like Java, like .NET, like Python, we're going to have its own logic, own code to do all the check-ins. So we may want to do it on the V3, on the API level, instead of doing on the client-side levels. But since
That makes sense.
Yeah, since the requirements is so frequently mentioned, so I did the basic levels, but it's not really complicated. So the bad thing is, since it's not complicated, it's not complete as well. So there still can be some case where the error still slip off from the code and go through the QBO side. So I need to decide how I'm going to do it for the client-side check-ins for all these special characters, for all these error cases, to see if we can make a good design for the SDK.
Try to balance that out. That's understandable. And then there's a couple of specifics getting asked about vendor address acceptance. Apparently, only specific addresses used to be accepted by QuickBooks.
That is still QBO bug. That's still QBO bug.
That's a QBO issue. Okay.
Yeah, I think they are working on it. We have just designated a small team, actually about 4 people, so to work on all the QBO bugs as P1 or P2 level. So people are requesting to fix it as soon as possible, actually affecting a lot of people. So besides the V4 designing implementations, there's a small team actually working on the bugs for V3 APIs. So we can reduce the bugs to a relatively smaller amount and fix all those ones which are causing big troubles for our developers. I think the address is one of them, and they're still under fixing right now. So,
got it. And this is actually a really good one. Someone wants to know if there's a automatic way to refresh the OAuth tokens without redirecting to the website, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. So refresh tokens is on the documentation as well. So.
And you have support for that built into the PHP SDK.
Right.
Well.
The only thing which is not available temporarily is for the get authorization code and get auth tokens. Those two was there before, but some people were saying it's not really intuitive the way since the way I put it in the beginning was not correct for the PHP SDK. So I temporarily removed these 2 features. One's for get auth code. Second is get the refresh token and access token from the auth code. That 2 part is not there. But for refresh token, it is built in as one of the feature on the SDK right now. So you can just use the get auth to login helper from the data service and simply call refresh token. And a token we're going to be returned from the refresh token as the newly updated tokens. And these tokens, actually I didn't mention it here, but if you look through the code on the OAuth2 part, it has a list of the getters. So you can get the field you want. So for example, get the expiration date for refresh token, get access token expiration date, and get the actual refresh token, and get the client ID, client secret. So all these fields can be using the get method to return from the object also to access tokens.
And if it already expired, right, you cannot renew, right? You have to renew before it expires or refresh before it expires?
So the refresh token in QuickBooks works in this way. So every time when I refresh the OAuth tokens with the refresh token, there's two cases. So the same refresh token will be going to be returned. So you just need to update your OAuth token. That's it. The second case is the QBO, we're going to return a different refresh token with a different OAuth token. So in that case, you have to change the refresh token as well. So it's a little tricky, but it's a security reason. So the way we did it, every time when you make a refresh token API call, always update the refresh token as well, which is the get refresh token. Always using the get refresh token call to update refresh token on this code or on your database. So next time, using the latest refresh token to make the refresh token API call. Otherwise, even the refresh token was mentioned as have 3 months validation period, but as you making the refresh token more and more, the refresh token may be replaced with a new one, and the old one will be expired. So that's the trick here. You have to remember to always remember to record your refresh token when you're making the refresh token API call.
Okay. Tom's asking, using SQL, is there a list of which column names I can use within the where clause?
So the where clause actually is not pure SQL query. So we can make example on the API Explorer here. So the where clause, the where part, it really depends on the response. So let's say if I do a query for the invoice, select all from invoice without any where clause. And I can see there's a list of the information returned, right? So let's say I want to have the doc number. Then I'm going to copy the doc number as the where clause and give it as a string value for whatever I want to find. So I want to find 1042. I'm going to enter 1042 here. I'm going to run the query, and it will return the result for 1042. And there's only one result returned. So that is how you're going to find the where clause. You're going to actually, based on the documentations here, there is ID. Each field has a documentation saying either going to be filterable or sortable. So all these fields with these two keywords can be used on the where clause. So ID can be used to query, and doc number can be used to query, as what we just did before. And the transaction date can be used to query. Others which are not listed here on the documentation with a filterable or sortable, you cannot do it. And for customer reference, you do not do something like, let's make an example here. Customer reference. So you don't need to do only for reference type, you don't need to do the customer reference .id or .value to find out something. It's going to give you 400 saying something was not working correctly. So for reference type, just using the custom reference as a single name string, and it can return you the information you want. So everything which is either filterable or sortable can be used on the where class. And that's how you're going to construct your SQL query to find the information you want. Make sense? David, you mute yourself. You just mute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So another question popped in here. Somebody's wondering about, is there any good practice to get updated records from QuickBooks? My gut says webhooks, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, we do have the one of the batch requests. Webhooks probably is the best option right now. So if you go to the programming guide. So webhooks probably is what we suggested right now for using the updated items from the QBO. You can always run a batch request to, let me see if I have a batch here. Dev guide, should be the dev guide.
Where's the batch?
Sorry, we always change our documentation a lot, so sometimes it can be hard to find the information.
Every week that happens.
Yeah.
They start hunting around for stuff.
Yeah, so yeah, here's the batch. So we can get the batch request to find out whether it's going to be a operation create or operation delete, or whether it's going to be operation update. So the batch request, we're going to using the batch as the endpoint with the company ID as a realm ID, and you can find the list of the information returned by the batch to see if something was changed, something was created, or something was updated. But still, probably webhooks is the best way right now to do it, as it saves times and it saves the QBO API calls, and it's much more efficient than batch request. If you don't have a way to implement webhooks, then the batch request will be the solution for you then.
Got it. I think we're at the end of the hour here. There's no more questions that are coming in. So Hao, I definitely would like to thank you for coming on and talking all about the PHP SDK. I love that you're so open to people emailing you if they have questions, that they can put issues right into your Jira inbox from the GitHub repository. So it's great that you're open to all that. And hopefully more and more people keep using the PHP SDK and just any of the SDKs in general, just to speed their ability to pump out code. So thank you very much. And yeah, well, hopefully we'll have you on as a guest again soon.
Okay. Thanks, David. I will appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.